Hello dear students, welcome back. Today we will start our lesson with nouns. We are going to provide them to uncountable and countable nouns. We have studied this in A2, B1, but these are pretty confusing for some of the students, so we will do a quick review and talk about them. Let's start with countable and uncountable nouns. What are the countables? What are the uncountables? For example, uncountables, we can talk about some categories that cannot be countable. Let's say liquids, materials. Most of the food that we're talking about, but also we can count some of these food. And then we have weather and etc. Of course we have more uncountable nouns other than these categories, but let's start with these. In liquids, for example, we cannot count them, we cannot measure them if we don't have a measurement. For example, we're talking about milk. If I want to count milk, I have to use a measurement. Let's say 1 carton, or 1 liter, or 1 cup, 1 glass, whatever. But if I don't have these measurements, I cannot count liquids. In an example, I cannot count milk. Or it's the same for water. We can say a bottle of water, but on its own, I cannot count water. What are countables? For example, we can count people. It can be students, let's say children, teachers, women, men. And we have materials. Let's say money. Let's say wood, glass. Money can be confusing for most of the people, but actually, if I don't have a currency, let's say TL, dollar, or euro, other than that, if I don't have a currency, we cannot count money on its own. I can say $3, but on its own, I cannot count money. Or I can, for example, say 1 kilograms of wood, but I cannot count wood on its own. Let's give some examples. For example, I want some ice cream. Ice cream is uncountable. We need a measurement, for example, 1 cup, 1 cone. But other than that, we cannot count ice cream. Or there are some students in the classroom. In this one, we have students. As you can see from the plural as, and I can count people, so this is a countable noun. Could you bring me a glass of water? In this one, if I didn't have a glass of water, only water, or I would use some, it will be uncountable. But I wanted to count it, and I added a measurement phrase before it, so now I can count it. But other than that, we cannot count uncountables. She wanted some pizza. In this case, I cannot count pizzas. So we have some phrases that we don't give an exact number or an exact measurement, amount, whatever, but we want to talk about not pretty precise measurements. So we will be using some, any, no, a lot, lots of, a few, a little, many, much. Now we will be talking about these. In this ones we have also some varieties we will talk about. But let's start with some. Where do we use some? With which nouns? We can also, we can both use some with uncountable and countable. But if I'm using it with countable nouns, it has to be plural. And mostly we use it with positive sentences, but it can also be in question sentences. Let's give examples. I want some cheesecake. In this one, I cannot count cheesecake. This is an uncountable one. I used with some. But I can also use it with plural nouns. She wanted some grapes. Or I can use it in a question sentence. Do you want some pie? In this one, you can see that I use it in a question sentence. Let's continue with any. We use it with negative sentences or question sentences. It can be uncountable or countable. Is there any room in the hall, for example? You can see that it is used in a question sentence. There isn't any room. There aren't any tomatoes in the grocery store. We don't have any milk. She doesn't need any help. The meaning is negative if you're using it in a negative sentence, or I can use it in a question sentence. But the thing that you should be careful with is that our verb is also negative, because when we skip to no, it's going to be different. Let's go on with no. It's only used in negative sentences. It can also, again, be used with uncountable and countable. But the difference is, we are talking about a negative meaning, but actually the sentence doesn't have a negative verb. Let's give an example. There is no room for 2 people. So, when we were talking about any, we said that the verb has to be negative. But when we're talking about no, the verb has to be affirmative. If I wanted to rewrite this sentence using any, I would say, the meaning is the same. But what you have to be careful is that the verb, is it negative or is it positive? We have no bananas. Again, you can see that the verb is affirmative, but the meaning we have is totally negative. Let's go on with many and much. Now, generally, 90% in academic language, we use these ones. If we're using these on their own, they're mostly used in negative sentences. But again, mostly there can be coincidences, that exceptions that we use it with affirmative sentences. For example, we don't have many invitations. Again, as I have said, mostly we use it in negative sentences, but it can also be an exception. With many, we use countable nouns. With much, we use uncountable nouns. They don't have much room left. We also have how many, how much, that we use in questions when we're talking about quantity or amount, when we're asking quantity or amount. Countable, uncountable, how many students do you have in your class, for example? And I could answer with, for example, I have 20 students in my class. How much milk do we need? We need 1 liter of milk, for example. And we also have too many, too much. Again, countable, uncountable. I have too many problems to solve, for example. I don't have too much time. We ate too many apples. We ate too much ice cream, for example. Now, let's talk about a few and a little. The amounts that we're talking about is not a lot. We have, but the amounts we have is not a lot. A few we use with countables, and a little we use with uncountables. For example, I have a few friends, which means not many. They have a little garden. She needed a few bananas for the cake. We wanted to get a little break. You can see the examples. Now we have a lot of and lots of. In this one, we can use them with both uncountable and countable again. For example, I visited a lot of countries this year. She needs lots of time to figure this out. In the first one, we're talking about a countable noun, and in the second one, the opposite. We needed a lot of sleep after our road trip. She had a lot of things to do. We also have hardly any, I have hardly any time, which means I almost don't have. So little. She knows hardly any rules about this game. We spent hardly any money there. We had everything we needed with us. She knew hardly any people there. Let's start from the beginning. We started our lesson with countable and uncountable nouns. We gave some example categories for both of them. For example, we can count people. Or if we are using a measurement, we can count uncountable nouns. But if we don't have any like this, we cannot count liquids, materials, food, weather, money, if we're not talking about a currency. I want some ice cream. Ice cream is uncountable. There are some students in the classroom. Could you bring me a glass of water? She wanted some pizza. We have some quantifiers that we use with nouns. And we started with some. We can use it in a positive sentence or in a question one. We use this both with uncountable and countable if it's plural. I want some cheesecake, which is uncountable. Grapes, I can count them, which is plural. We continue it with any. It can give a negative meaning, or we can use it in a question. Again, both with countable and uncountable. Is there any room in the hall, which is a question sentence? There isn't any room. There aren't any tomatoes in the grocery store. We don't have any milk. She doesn't need any help. Then we went on with no, which gives us the same meaning with any, but the use is pretty different because although they give the same meaning, when we're talking about any, our verb is also negative, but when we're using no, our verb is affirmative. You can see that there is no room for two people. There isn't any room for two people. Then we continued with many and much. We mostly use these two in negative sentences, but there are some exceptions in daily language, or you can encounter some uses in positive sentences. We don't have many invitations, and they don't have much room left. So as I have said, you can also see these in questions or affirmative sentences, but mostly the right use is to use it in negative sentences. Then when we want to know the quantity or amount of the noun that we're talking about, we use how many or how much to ask it. And how many with countable again? How much with uncountable? How many students do you have in your class? I have 20 students in my class. In this one, I want you to pay attention to the answer because the question is how much. I'm talking about something that is not countable, but the answer, you can see 1 liter. So in this one, since the question asks us the amount that we need, so I had to use a measurement to give the answer. Then we went on with too many, too much. When we're talking about these, we're talking about something extreme amounts. I have too many problems to solve. We're talking about something that is a lot, but in a negative way. We ate too many apples, more than a lot, again. All of the manys you see, we use with countable, much with uncountable. I don't have too much time, which means I have, but not a lot. We ate too much ice cream. Then we talked about a few and a little. Different than any and no, we have some amounts, some quantity, but it's not nearly enough. I have a few friends, they have a little garden. A lot of, lots of. You cannot change it, you cannot change the phrases. I visited a lot of countries this year. She needs lots of time to figure this out. We needed a lot of sleep after our road trip. She had a lot of things to do. Then we talked about hardly any. We're talking about almost nothing. We have so low quantity or amounts that it's not enough. We're not talking about a quantity that is enough. I have hardly any time. I almost don't have any time. It is so little that. She knows hardly any rules about this game. She hardly knows. She hardly any rules. So the thing is, yes, she does know a little, but it is not enough to play the game. We spent hardly any money there. We had everything we needed with us. She knew hardly any people there. She knew a few maybe, but if we wrote this sentence using a few, they both mean that they both represents a low amount, a low quantity, but in this one we're talking about something that is not enough. And the second one, if we're using a few, we're talking about something that is again low in amount, but we're talking about something enough. As we have said, this is yes, it is a little, but we're talking about something that is enough. And here again, in quantity, we don't have something that is not enough. Now we are going to continue with a grammar topic, which is causatives. We have the same form in Turkish as well, which makes it easier to comprehend. In causatives, we're talking about subject gets someone to do the action in the sentence. Subject actually doesn't do the verb in the sentence. Rather, someone else does it. What we want to tell by that is, for example, I get my, or I have my hair cut every month. As you can see, we have the subject, but actually the subject doesn't do the action that we have here. Instead, someone else does it, but it's not a passive voice either. I kind of hire someone to do the job that we're talking about in the sentence. What is the grammatic rule here is that subjects have or get, objects, and we use verb form here. Let's give an example. By the way, the verb here is in verb 3 form. Let's give an example. Let's write the same example in every tense we can use. Let's do a chart here. For example, this is present simple. This is present progressive. Past simple. Past progressive, will, present perfect, past perfect, and going to. How do we use causatives in each tense? For example, in present simple, I have my car fixed. As you can see, the verb actually doesn't change. In present progressive, I am having my car fixed. I had my car fixed. Past progressive, I was having my car fixed. And will, I will have my car fixed. In present perfect, I have had my car fixed. Past perfect, I had my car fixed. And going to, I am going to have my car fixed. As you can see, it looks pretty complicated, but as you can see, in every tense, the verb 3 form here doesn't change. The only thing that we change is actually here. How do we form have or get in those sentences? I have my car fixed. I'm having my car fixed. Here doesn't change all the time. For example, she has her nails polished every week. But I also want to add an information that who actually does this action. Remember from passive voice 1 and 2, how did we add who actually does that action? We add by and the person that actually does it at the end of the sentence. For example, let's say by Maria. Or if I want to add who fixed my car, I can add by Michael, let's say. The person that actually happens this action. So again, let's review. The subject in these sentences actually doesn't occur the action that we have in these sentences. Rather, the subjects we have get someone done the action we have. She has her nails polished every week by Maria. Or, I have my garden watered every day by the housemaid. We're talking about something that I hire someone and I'm not the one actually who does the watering, but someone else that I hired to do. We only used have so far. What is the difference between have and get? The order is the same. Subject, have, object, verb 3, past participle, subject, get, object, past participle. What is the difference between these two? When we are using have, when we are making a causative sentence, subject paid someone or asked a favor to do the action. But when we are using get in a causative sentence, it means that I, the subject, persuaded someone to do the action. This is the difference between them. We have a lot more causative forms, but these two are the only ones that you need in B2 level. Let's give examples for both of them. Maria has her dog walked every day by her husband. This is not by force. It can be a favor, it can be something that is paid, but if I rewrite this sentence using get, it would mean that I convinced him. Maria convinced her husband to do that job. Maria gets her dog. The same example. It means that she convinced, persuaded her husband to do that job. So we can say that it is kind of by force, but this one, it can be something paid or like a favor. The person who does it with well. But in this one, they are not eager, rather we're convincing or persuading that person to do that job. We have dropped ourselves to the airport by my uncle. So you can see that actually we are the object here, we're not the subject, because someone else does that thing, does the job that affects us in the sentence. For example, she always has her hair dyed by the same hairdresser. In this one, again, we have a subject, but actually she is not the one who does the dyeing action in the sentence, but the hairdresser that we're talking about does it always. Okay, let's do a quick review of what we have done so far. We started with countable and uncountable nouns. We gave category examples for each of the category. For example, people can be counted, but we cannot count liquids unless we don't have a measurement. What measurements are we talking about? Let's write a note here. For example, I can use currency to count the money. Where's the money? Here. Or, for example, I can use currency to count money, which is uncountable. Or I can use, for example, a bottle to measure a liquid. Or, for example, kilograms. Or, let's say, when we're talking about food, I can say a slice of bread. Normally, bread is uncountable, but I want to measure it, so I use something that I can measure. Then we gave some examples using some. We can use it in affirmative sentences or in question form. I can use it with both uncountable and countable, but it has to be plural. I want some cheesecake, which is uncountable in this case. She wanted some grapes. This is plural, countable. Do you want some pie? For example, this is a use of in a question form. Then we went on with any, which we can use with both, again, countable and uncountable. It can be in a negative sentence or a question sentence. Is there any room in the hall? There isn't any room. There aren't any tomatoes in the grocery store. We don't have any milk. She doesn't need any help. What is next? No. They give the same meaning, any and no, but the only difference is when we are using any, we have to use our verb in a negative form, but when it comes to no, our verb has to be affirmative because no on its own gives us the negative meaning. Then we talked about many and much. We said that mostly 90% of time, which is the correct version, we use them in negative sentences. But as I have said before, there are some exceptions, or in daily language, you can see them used in positive sentences or in questions. We don't have many invitations, they don't have much room left. Then if I want to ask the quantity or amount of something, I can use how many or how much. Then we talked about an extreme amount, an amount that we wouldn't want that much. I have too many problems to solve. Again, extreme. I don't have too much time. Then we talked about a little, which we're talking about something that is enough, but we have just enough amounts. This one's for countable, this one's for uncountable. Then we talked about a lot of, lots of, which is not the same as too much, too many, because in too much, too many, we're talking about extreme amounts. But in this one, this is a positive one. Too much, too many is a negative one. I visited a lot of countries this year. Then we talked about hardly any. We don't have enough amount of that thing that we're talking about. She knows hardly any rules about this game. Then, as our grammar topic for this lesson, we talked about causatives, making someone do something. Subject gets someone to do the action in the sentence, but subject doesn't actually do it. And our grammar rule for that is subject, have or get, object, verb 3. And if we want to add to the sentence who does it, who makes the action, we can add by that person. This looks pretty complicated, but I think it can be read. The only thing we change according to the tense is that here. According to the tense, we only change the main verb of the sentence. I have, I am having, I had, I was having. But we don't change anything about the verb 3 form and the sentence. She has her nails polished every week by Maria, if I want to add who does it. I have my garden watered every day by the housemaid. Then we talked about the difference between have something done and get something done. The difference is when we're talking about have something done, we are asking someone and that person does it voluntarily, or we pay someone to do that job. But if we write that sentence using get something done, we are forcing someone or convincing or persuading someone to do that job we're talking about. Maria has her dog walked every day by her husband, not by force. Her husband may be doing it as a favor or voluntarily. But in here, the same example, we can understand that Maria convinced her husband or persuaded her husband to do that job. So this is the difference between them. She always has her hair dyed by the same hairdresser. Our tense here is present simple. You can see it from the main verb of the sentence. We have a time expression, and then, but the tense doesn't matter, as I have said. Here, verb 3 doesn't change. By the same hairdresser, you can see who does the action in this sentence. Let's write down a couple of more examples. They get their uncle they get their presents bought by their uncle. So, in the sentence, you can see the get in the example, and which means we understand that the subject of the sentence actually forced this person to do the job in the sentence. My sister gets me done the housework all the time. You can see in this sentence that this is not something that this person does by will, but rather we're talking about something that is convinced or persuaded, but it is done anyways. My mother gets my dog groomed every year. So again, we're not talking about something that is voluntarily done, but rather by force. I got Tad to repair my car. In this example, we don't see a verb 3 form. Why is that? Because, as you can see, I have the person who actually does the action in the beginning of the sentence rather than using by and who does it. So in this particular case, we have this rule: subject gets or have, someone do something. This is the rule that we have here. We have Mary to cook the dinner. Again, you can see this rule: subject have, someone to do something. Okay, guys, dear students, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed and understood our lesson. Please make sure that you study and review all the grammar topics that we have studied so far. Hope to see you on our next lesson. Take care of yourselves.